And so she called me, and she just went off on me.
So like I say, that Steve Harvey was in a perfect position to help me get clemency. I wouldn't have to go through what I went through, but God's hand was in.
Marjorie Harvey's story isn't just about being Steve Harvey's wife, at least not according to her ex-husband, Jim Townsend, who is now pushing a far darker interpretation of her past. Townsend, who spent over 20 years in federal prison, has begun sharing his version of events, claiming that the polished public image associated with the Harvey brand sits on top of a much older history of secrecy, pressure, and high-stakes associations. What he's describing isn't some recycled internet rumor or the usual post-divorce bitterness. Townsend was swept up in a major federal case in the early 1990s.
Harvey sending this? He's sending shots your way?
Steve Harvey was hating on me big time.
90s, one that authorities connected to large-scale trafficking activity between Memphis and Houston. Serious enough that investigators scrutinized not only him but the people in his immediate orbit back then. Marjorie wasn't the couture-clad philanthropist fans recognize today. She was, according to Townsend's retelling, a young Memphis woman married to a man federal agents considered a key figure in their investigation. Townsend has claimed publicly that investigators gathered material that could have implicated her, and that he accepted a deal meant to shield her from indictment, claims that have not been substantiated by federal authorities. He argues that if his account is accurate, it adds a different dimension to the rise of the Harvey empire. A woman who learned early how to navigate risky environments, stay distant from official paperwork, and allow those around her to absorb the legal consequences. Meanwhile, the Marjorie the public sees today is a globe-trotting style figure, a self-branded Christian entrepreneur who posts scripture, hosts charity events.
I talked to Morgan. I said, Morgan, tell your stepdad, Steve. I said, he's in a perfect position to help me get clemency. At that time, they was giving out clemency.
And presents herself as the refined matriarch of a blended family. Townsend's version paints a sharply contrasting portrait, one of a survivor, strategist, and someone who, he claims, understood the rules of power long before fame entered the picture. When Townsend says Marjorie helped them then and helps Steve now, he's drawing a long, uninterrupted line from the underground world of 1990s Memphis to the polished, syndication-ready Harvey brand that emerged in the 2000s and 2010s. His argument hinges on timing, and the cultural moment he's releasing his story into. Townsend's memoir, Snakes in the Garden, a project he began drafting behind bars and published after receiving a presidential pardon in 2017, arrives during a news cycle hungry for anything tied to the Epstein archive, the legal
Again, there was new names in some of the emails that I think investigators need to look at. In particular, I jumped on the name of a modeling agent who, in a similar fashion to Jean-Luc Brunel, who brought underage girls from overseas to Jeffrey Epstein for abuse. There was another man. What was interesting about this other individual is that he also apparently provided young models for Donald Trump's modeling agency.
Raveling of Diddy, and a growing public skepticism toward picture-perfect celebrity marriages. In early November 2025, U.S. lawmakers released over 20,000 pages of Epstein-related files. Among them were email chains in which Epstein references Donald Trump as the dog that never barked, along with lists of alleged victims whose identities were initially masked and later revealed in expanded versions of the documents. The material didn't confirm any grand master roster of everyone who ever moved within Epstein's orbit, but it reignited debates about who appeared.
See, I had 5 years of probation on that, but Obama administration took that off of me.
Who was obscured, and who was conspicuously absent. Against this backdrop, entertainment insiders now describe Townsend's revived accusations as a countdown clock for the Harvey household. On one end is an ex-husband claiming he once negotiated with federal investigators to keep Marjorie out of his case, claims that have not been corroborated by federal authorities. On the other is a high-profile couple intent on stopping any storyline that tries to associate their brand with the same circles that have already engulfed billionaires, heads of state, and a fallen music mogul. And it isn't the first time Steve and Marjorie have had to fend off the internet's appetite for scandal. Back in 2023, they were forced to respond when viral commentators floated rumors that she had cheated with a bodyguard and a private chef, claims they denied.